This episode is brought to you by H1M. New horror. Subscribe now. Don't listen alone. Welcome to Haunted Grove, the podcast that drags you into the darkest corners of the supernatural. Each episode delivers chilling short stories of vengeful spirits, haunted places, and things that should not exist. These are true encounters with the unknown, told to unsettle, disturb, and stay with you. Are you ready to face your fears? Then step into the grove and let the horror begin. My name is Marcus Thorne. In the fall of 2008, I was a sound archivist, scraping by between grants by recording atmospheric audio for indie video games. I saw an ad online from a woman seeking an audio engineer for a one-day field recording project. The pay was $1,000. Cash. The requirements were professional-grade equipment, a willingness to walk all day, and an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. I sent an email with my credentials. 2 days later, I had the job. The woman who called herself Elspeth wanted to meet in my hometown of Oak Haven, Massachusetts, a place I'd left at 18 but returned to every few months to see my ailing grandmother at the Blackwood Pines nursing home. Elspeth's instructions were clear. At the end of the day, I would hand over all the master recordings. In return, I would receive my payment and a promise to never speak of what I had recorded. Her final email warned me. You will hear things that are not there. They are echoes of this place. They cannot harm you, but they can change how you remember it. Be certain you are willing to risk that. I was young, arrogant, and needed the money. I agreed. Before we met, I looked her up. The name Elspeth Vane yielded little. She'd been a research fellow at a university in Scotland, specializing in acoustic archaeology. Her name was loosely tied to a privately funded research group called the Hinterland Collective, which a few conspiracy sites claimed was dedicated to studying and containing what they called places of deep resonance. It sounded like nonsense. The day of the job, I spent the morning with my grandmother. She was weaker than I'd ever seen her, her mind adrift. Without mentioning the day's work, I asked her if she ever regretted staying in Oak Haven. She gripped my hand, her eyes suddenly lucid and fearful. "This town holds its breath, Marcus," she'd whispered. "There was a time, a long time, after the quarry collapsed. The silence was wrong. So many people started hearing things." Then she drifted away again, humming a tuneless, repetitive melody I'd never heard before. I met Elspeth at the town's small train depot. She was older than I expected, maybe late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and clothes that were practical and worn. She paid me up front, the crisp bills a stark contrast to the crumbling station around us. We walked out into a cold, gray afternoon. "My project," she began, "is to capture the ambient sounds of Oak Haven. It's dead air. I want you to keep your microphones recording continuously. If you hear anything unusual, anything at all that I don't appear to react to, do not mention it. We will review the tapes later." We walked for hours. Elspeth led us on a meandering, seemingly aimless path through the town. She never spoke, just walked with a grim purpose, occasionally stopping to close her eyes and tilt her head, as if listening for something beyond my own range of hearing. I followed a few paces behind, my shotgun mic pointed forward, my headphones isolating the sounds of the world, the wind in the pines, the distant traffic, the laughter of children from a schoolyard. We ended up on a trail that led to the old granite quarry. It had been abandoned since the 1950s, after a catastrophic flood killed a dozen workers. Elspeth stopped at the edge of the vast water-filled pit and stood in silence for a long time. Then she gestured to my recorder. "Play back the last 2 minutes," she said. I rewound the digital track. Through my headphones, I heard the sounds I expected. The wind, our footsteps on the gravel path. But underneath it was something else, something my ears had not perceived in the moment. It was the faint, rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel, and the muffled shouts of men, their voices echoing as if from a great distance. Elspeth listened, her face impassive. "The resonance is strong here," she murmured. "Let's continue." We walked to the abandoned St. Giles Church on the edge of the woods. Inside, dust motes danced in the light from the grimy stained glass windows. Elspeth walked to a specific pew in the front row and produced a polished steel tuning fork from her coat. She struck it against the back of the pew. A pure, clear note filled the silent church. "Record this," she commanded. I held the microphone close. The note hung in the air, then faded. "Play it back," she said. I did. The pure note came through the headphones, but as it decayed, it fractured. The clean tone warped into a series of clicks and static pops. It sounded almost like Morse code. Elspeth listened intently, her eyes closed. "I see," she whispered, seeming not pleased, but grimly satisfied. She jotted something down in a small notebook. As we left the church, the change in the atmosphere was palpable. The air grew colder. The sky darkened. My earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a creeping dread. We walked back toward the center of town, toward Blackwood Pines, toward my grandmother's nursing home. As we crossed the wide, manicured lawn of the home, Elspeth suddenly stopped. She was staring at a man sitting on a bench near the rose garden. He was one of the residents, a frail old man in a wheelchair, a thick plaid blanket tucked around his legs. Elspeth walked toward him, and I followed, the microphone still recording. "Mr. Alastair," she said, her voice soft but firm. The old man didn't seem to hear her. He was staring blankly at the sky, his hands trembling slightly in his lap. Elspeth knelt in front of him. "You have to stop," she said. "You're getting stronger. You're hurting them." The old man turned his head slowly, his rheumy eyes fixing on her. A faint rattling sound came from his throat, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Elspeth reached out and gently touched his hand. "The boy," she said. "Tell me where you put the boy." The old man's expression didn't change, but the rattling sound grew louder, more insistent. Elspeth stood up, her face a mask of frustration and sorrow. "It's no use," she said to me, turning away. "He's too far gone. He's just an amplifier now." She told me to stop recording. She said she needed to prepare for what came next. She instructed me to go to the diner across the street, eat something, and meet her back at the main entrance in 2 hours. She walked toward the woods at the edge of the nursing home property and disappeared among the trees. I went to the diner, my mind reeling. I sat in a booth and played back the audio from the church, the clicks and pops. I pulled out my phone and looked up a Morse code chart. It took me a few tries, but I deciphered the message hidden in the resonance. A single name. Alastair. When I met Elspeth at the entrance to Blackwood Pines, night had fallen. She looked exhausted, but her eyes burned with a feverish intensity. "The day's work is done," she said, "but my own work is just beginning. Tonight I'm going to try to ground the resonance." She handed me a small, heavy object wrapped in oilcloth. "This is a prototype, a sonic damper. If something happens, if I don't come out, get this to the address on the back of the NDA. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. "Now go," she said, "and do not come back here. Ever." She turned and walked into the nursing home, disappearing through the automatic doors. I should have left. I should have taken the device and driven straight out of town. But I couldn't. I walked to the back of the building to the wing where my grandmother's room was. Her light was on. I crept closer, hiding in the shadows of the decorative hedges. The window to the sub-basement boiler room was cracked open, a dim, flickering light emanating from within. I peered through the grimy glass. What I saw inside was not a boiler room. Elspeth had transformed it. Strange, jury-rigged antennae were positioned around the room. Oscilloscopes drew frantic green lines in the dark. In the center, my grandmother's wheelchair-bound neighbor, Mr. Alastair, sat facing a wall of speakers, his head lolling. Elspeth was at a control panel turning dials, her face illuminated by the glow of the screens. Then, the sound began. It started as a low hum, but quickly escalated into a deafening cacophony, a swirling vortex of whispers, machine clatter, static, and that awful rattling dry leaf sound. I saw Elspeth grimace, pressing her hands to her temples. She shouted something I couldn't hear over the noise. Suddenly, the lights on her console flared and died. The room was plunged into darkness, save for the frantic lines on the oscilloscopes. I saw Elspeth's silhouette stagger backward, and I saw Mr. Alastair's head snap up. From the speakers, a single voice emerged from the chaos. A voice that was both ancient and childlike, and it spoke a single, clear word. "Mine." I saw Elspeth fall. I didn't see what hit her. I only saw her body crumple to the floor as the sound cut out, replaced by a profound and terrifying silence. I ran. I ran through the manicured gardens, past the benches and the rose bushes, my feet pounding on the perfect grass. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove, the sonic damper heavy on the seat beside me. Just before I turned onto the highway, I risked one last glance in my rearview mirror. In the window of my grandmother's room, I saw her silhouette. She was standing, perfectly still, looking out into the night. And I could have sworn, even from that distance, that I could hear her humming that same tuneless, awful melody. I never went back. I mailed the device as instructed. I never heard another word. I read the Oak Haven local paper online, though. A week after that night, there was a small article about a sudden, unexplained outbreak of acute acoustic trauma among the residents of the Blackwood Pines Memory Care Wing. Doctors were baffled. The article mentioned one fatality, an elderly resident named Alastair Poe, who died of an apparent stroke. And it mentioned my grandmother, who had been transferred to a state psychiatric facility after she began speaking in a language none of the doctors or linguists could identify. I still have the master recordings from that day. Sometimes late at night, I put on my headphones and listen. I listen to the wind, the traffic, the children's laughter. And underneath it all, If I turn the volume up high enough, I can still hear the whispers, the clicks, and the clanging hammer, the echoes of a town that holds its breath, waiting for the silence to be filled. And that's where we leave you for this journey into the unknown on Haunted Grove. Thank you for daring to listen to tonight's chilling tales. If these stories have lingered with you, please consider following us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a rating or review. It truly helps more sleepless souls find their way to the Grove. Join us again in 2 weeks for another descent into the darkness. Until then, keep the lights on and stay safe.